Hello, film nerds, and welcome to Blockbuster Card, a new show from Osiris Media and Library Card Productions. I am Brian Brinkman, and I am joined today by RJ and Megan, two veteran podcasters who have definitely never once sent a death threat to a producer who refused to read their work. And they're definitely not podcasting right now from outside of my window while watching me read this intro. RJ and Megan, how are we doing today?
Great. That was quite the intro, Brian. I like that.
I just wanted to
Getting
say
us
that
in the
there's
spirit.
there's still time for all that stuff.
Still time for everything,
That's
especially
true.
the death threats. So, as noted, this is a brand new show because what we all need is another podcast. And we are going to take our approach that we usually take to literature and spin it out to chat about all caps movies. As avid film fans, we are constantly talking about movies, directors, great performances, and whether or not a film, quote, works in our private text threads. So we figured that we'd bring those conversations to life here for you all. We hope to come to you every few weeks with a movie recommendation, plus a deep dive conversation around the themes, scenes, shots, and lines that hit us hard. Keep your eyes peeled to this feed, plus our socials for upcoming episodes, and watch the movies in advance of them dropping. I promise that we won't be dropping any seasons of Prestige TV while claiming it's a movie, and we'll welcome any and all recommendations as this show gets rolling. For our first episode of Blockbuster Card, we are discussing Robert Altman's 1992 satirical Hollywood mystery, The Player, starring Tim Robbins, Greta Scacchi, Fred Ward, Whoopi Goldberg, Peter Gallagher, Cynthia Stevenson, Vincent D'Onofrio, Lyle Lovett, along with a host of cameos from seemingly every single star famous in the early 1990s, and maybe, just maybe, Julia Roberts. This is a film that begs the question: a producer receives death threats from a writer, but which one? Guys, this is one of my favorite films I've watched all year. It's stacked with subversive humor, hilarious self-owns of modern Hollywood, endless references to bottled water, and a true Hollywood ending. I'm so excited to dive into this discussion today. But first, as is only proper in a podcast, we need more preamble. I have to know, what was the last great movie that you saw? Megan, let's start with you.
I saw a movie last week that I really loved. It is called Birth. It's a 2004 film by Jonathan Glazer, and it's with Nicole Kidman. And it's about a woman whose husband dies about 8 years earlier, and she's just kind of gotten over this death, and she's about to marry someone new. But a boy shows up at her house, her apartment, claiming to be her husband reincarnated. And it is a creepy film about love and loss and the power of belief and imagination. I recently saw Zone of Interest. I saw it about a year and a half ago, Jonathan Glazer's film about the family life of a commander at Auschwitz, which is an incredible film. And I was really
Mhm.
blown away by the way he uses music and tension in his films. And he brings that to Birth as well. The movie is incredibly tense. The music is pulsing and haunting and driving, and the whole story is pretty enthralling. And I'd love for you guys to check it out.
That is on my to watch list. I've been meaning to go deep into Jonathan Glazer's world ever since watching Zone of Interest. Good buddy, friend of the pod, Mr. Brian Lee Weaver, raves about that film, so I need to check it out as well. RJ, I know that you were watching at least 5 movies a week, movies as you complement all of the literature that you read. Tell me, what was the last great movie that you saw?
Well, the last great movie I saw was the last great movie you told me to watch, which was called After Hours, which I watched last week, which I enjoyed.
You
It's an,
enjoyed.
I would say that this idea of like tightly constructed stories that just really deliver on the idea that they were intending to deliver on the whole time is an interesting thing that I feel like I don't see very much these days.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Maybe we can talk about that in the context of this because this is another movie that has that. But it's, tightly plotted and really well delivered and fun and ridiculous. And I liked it.
It's a great plug as well because that will be Blockbuster Card episode 2. The
Yes.
date that we'll be
Ooh, breaking
discussing it,
news.
TBD. But yes, our second episode will be Martin Scorsese's subversive 1985 romp through the Lower East Side of New York City. Is it the Lower East Side, Meg?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
believe
where
it
we're
is.
at in the
Yeah,
1980s after hours?
I love that. I love films that take place when New York was still gritty. It's fantastic.
So gritty. You can't get anywhere. You lose $20 and you're just completely screwed, which I think would be the case today in New York City, but you would be in some Michael Bloomberg hellhole were you to lose your $20 in today's New York City. So we'll be talking about that next. But today we'll be talking about The Player. My most recent great film that I watched, I finished this morning. Friends of the pod and future listeners to this podcast will note that it usually takes me 3 days to finish a film, just the way of my life right now. Spent the last 3 nights watching The Thin Red Line, which came out in 1998 and follows a group of soldiers in the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942 and 1943. It was Terrence Malick's first film in, I believe, 15 years. And every young male actor in Hollywood said, we have to be in this. It's a fascinating, near 3-hour, really cerebral picture of what it means to be a soldier, what it means to be at war. The rah-rah nature that you get from a lot of military films are not present here at all. It's very quiet. It's very pensive. It's got amazing music. The score is directed by Hans Zimmer. Every single actor from the 1990s, Nick Nolte, Sean Penn, George Clooney, Adrian Brody, John C. Reilly, so on and so forth, are in this movie, many of which have 0 speaking lines until like 2 hours and 15 minutes in. It's a really, really wild movie. Hit me really hard. It is currently my 6th favorite movie I've seen in 2025. I cannot recommend it enough to you guys. So hopefully already you guys have 3 movies out there that you can put on your to watch list once you finish this episode of Blockbuster Card.
That movie, I remember it really striking me when I saw it. I saw it many, many, many years ago. But there's sort of that genre of those films that started to come out around that time about like the kind of camaraderie about war that felt different than some of the other ones. And I really think they're beautifully done. And I forgot about that score, but when you say it, it kind of brings it back a little bit. I want to revisit that.
You definitely should. It brings up the eternal question of how in the hell did Shakespeare in Love win the Best Picture when it was up against Saving Private
Oh my
Ryan
God.
and The Thin Red Line. I have no idea. Well, I do know why. I do know how. There's a great book on Oscar history that includes a full chapter on the 1999 Oscars and
No
how
way.
Harvey Weinstein just ramrodded that movie through. But yeah, just an incredible film. A great compliment to Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, I never got over that issue, to be
Me either.
honest. That jump started a decades long, to this day, honestly, dislike of Gwyneth Paltrow. She also won Best Actress that
She
year.
did.
Go
did.
ahead and watch that performance. It's nothing. I'm sorry, but it's nothing. And it's just nepotism and it's very annoying. And I really dislike that. I mean, the movie's fine, but I disliked it winning and I disliked her winning. And the whole thing was just frustrating.
She beat out a young Kate Blanchett
Come on.
acting as Queen Elizabeth. We will be revisiting the 1999 Oscars at some point in the future, I promise, because there's a lot of great movies that happened there. And there's a movie that should not have won Best Picture that did. But that's happened many times. That's happened many times in history. That's something we'll be talking about. But today, we are talking about The Player. What is The Player? Well, The Player follows Griffin Mill, a struggling Hollywood studio executive who is dating his story editor, Bonnie Chereau. His job is to hear story pitches from screenwriters, greenlighting only about 12 out of 50,000 submissions every year. The movie begins with his job being threatened by an up and coming exec, Larry Levy, who begins working at the studio. In addition, Mill has been receiving death threat postcards assumed to be from a screenwriter whose pitch he rejected. From here, the movie takes us to Pasadena, a city which never arrests the wrong man, to a viewing of The Bicycle Thief, to a back alley murder and cover up, to a desert hot springs, to a police lineup, to the first viewing of a raw and emotional new film which promises 0 stars and 0 compromises on a happy Hollywood ending. Throughout, we muse over the multitude varieties of bottled water options in Southern California, question whether or not true love is possible, and rework a film with 0 compromises until it's palatable for audiences and Academy voters alike. Is Julia Roberts available? Will Griffin spend the rest of his life in prison, or worse, lose out his industry position to Larry Levy? Will Hollywood finally gift us with a brilliant film that makes us feel true despair without the need for a star promoting it? Are double-breasted suits actually hot? All these questions and more are answered in The Player. Let's begin with just a question here for you all. RJ, what were your thoughts, your general thoughts, your big takeaway from The Player when you watched this?
Well, at first, I just want to say congratulations to both of you for creating a new podcast within a podcast, the blockbuster card within the library card. Even in all the years of doing special series on HF Pod, I don't think we've created another show inside of our show. So this
A
is
show within a show.
It's so Shakespearean. Come on.
It's so phenomenal, and I'm proud of you guys. Yeah, I mean I guess you start to realize toward the end that that the whole thing is a joke on itself, right? And you kind of I mean, there's so many moments in the movie where it reminds me of reading a book like The Bee Sting or something, where you're like, why did you say that you saw that movie in Pasadena last night? Like, that was really dumb. Or why doesn't he just tell one of his colleagues that someone's sending him death threats, and he's getting himself deeper into this hole, but and then you realize at the end that it actually was just a really well constructed, play on making fun of Hollywood, and the way it wraps up and the way it ends is just so perfect, and I don't think there's really any mistakes in the whole thing. It's just there's no extraneous scenes, there's no extraneous lines. It's all really perfectly packaged, which I feel like in a lot of movies that I watch, that's just not the case, so I guess that's
I would
the
agree.
main takeaway was you see all these moments where he could have made different decisions, but then at the end you realize that's not the story they were telling us.
Yeah, there's not this desire to kind of layer upon an idea that doesn't really go anywhere. It moves forward, and at times, I think it feels, especially the first time you watch it, it feels like you're just watching kind of a collection of scenes. But then, as you get to the end, you realize everything was really tightly packaged. I do want to compliment you pulled a me move. I usually try in our library card episodes to compare books to movies, and here you were able to compare a book to a movie, or a movie to a book. So thank you very much for doing the reverse. This is the inverse of a library card. Meg, what were your takeaways, kind of broad takeaways from this film?
I love satire when it's done right. It's kind of the ultimate form of entertainment, right? It's smart, but it's also entertaining. So it's not self-serious, which I think is really fun and I think perfect for this kind of a story. What I loved about this story the most, though, is that it's really hard to make art about making art. And this film is so meta. I just recently watched 8.5, the Fellini film from '63, and the whole movie is so similar to The Player, and I'm so curious if Altman was inspired by that at all. I know he didn't write this; it was a novel, it was an adaptation, but that movie is about a filmmaker who's run out of ideas, and he retreats into his own fantasies and kind of gets lost there. And it's super creative. But it's this idea, as the movie's going on, it's commenting on itself and making fun of itself the whole time. And I saw that happening so much in this movie. And I think the way that Altman uses irony is just really, really exceptional in this movie. I think if you think about that famous opening shot that they have in this long track shot, it's one of the longest tracking shots like in film history up to that point. I don't know if it's been beaten now. I'm sure it has. And that whole film, they're talking about long tracking shots while they're filming it. Like, so the characters are talking about, and he asked the screenwriters to put that in. There's just this level of awareness that if it's done wrong, it comes off so poorly. But it works so well in this film because he manages to strike that perfect tone of being enjoyable and fun, but also ironic and smart, which I think is hard to do.
Yeah, and I think we all know when we see kind of subversive films like this, and that kind of sarcasm within films that don't land and ends up
Yeah.
feeling like you think you're playing a joke on us, but we can all see through it. This movie, the way that it begins, and I appreciate you segueing us perfectly into the second segment of the show here, which is talking about great scenes in the movie and scenes that stuck with us, because obviously we have to talk about the first scene in the movie, the 8.5 minute tracking shot to kick things off that begins with all black. You hear quiet on the set, you hear action, you open up on a scene. That music then comes in, that big bass line, those kind of synthesizers that give you this sense of like, oh, we're in some sort of like a gritty cop drama here, what's going on. And then a secretary comes in and mistakenly says that a studio exec is out of the office. You're never allowed to say that. The exec is always here. The exec is in a meeting. What are you talking about? And from there, the camera pans back. We see movies now more than ever on the big wall in the studio. We hear from Fred Ward's character that he's never actually seen any of the famous movies that really showcase great tracking shots or great acting, but he's seen all the kind of weird culturally irrelevant American movies. There's just so much in there. There's so much cross conversation going. There's so many, oh my God, that person's in this movie as well. And as you're watching the scene, the entire movie is unfolding itself to you, where we hear, everything from ideas around The Graduate 2, the Julia Roberts jokes. This was 18 months after Pretty Woman. So of course, Julia Roberts can be in anything. Yeah, we can get Julia Roberts, maybe Bruce Willis as well. He's a big star at this point in time. And it almost immediately, and Altman is great at this throughout his larger collection, but you almost immediately get this sense of you are in on the joke. The joke is that Hollywood is as focused on just bottom lines, profits itself as you would imagine it to be, but also is kind of stumbling to those conclusions throughout it. And you're immediately brought into this world that's kind of like you're giving it there's like a wink and a nod to you being there, but also there's a quickness and there's a relationship aspect that unless you're in there, it's really hard to break into that overall culture. And so from the start, knowing that you're in on the joke is a huge aspect of what drives this overall movie. RJ, what were your thoughts on that opening scene, and like how did that capture you into it?
Mostly I was like, there's like the guy from Entourage. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And also like, I cannot believe that people wore suits like this. Like, it's just
So
it's
cool. It's so
it's
awesome.
can you
It's such a
imagine
commitment.
wearing? Yeah, it's like it seems
Such a
so
commitment.
uncomfortable and so just like, oh God. So those were my main thoughts, but I didn't know all that stuff until after, sort of like picking it up. I mean, obviously every part of that scene is like people kind of like having stereotypical conversations about Hollywood that
Yeah.
it seems like you're in on a joke, but then you don't realize the first time that it's like all about the thing that they're actually doing, which is even more meta,
Right.
as Megan said. But yeah, I mean, it's really cool, and it like sets it up in an interesting way. I think we're so used to seeing, you know, whether it's like a movie or a book or a TV show or whatever, like a scene is very, at least in my mind, it's so specific, you know, usually, right? Like a
Yeah.
scene is like there's a place and there's a couple people or one person, and there's like, you know, that whole kind of like long intro scene is a really interesting way to start, but it allows them to like establish the joke early on, which is pretty great.
It works like a prologue without being a prologue, like without
Yeah.
being really over dramatic. It kind of like you can, I mean, I did this the other night. I just turned on the player and watched the opening 8 to
Yeah.
10 minutes and then was like, cool. I got literally all I needed right there, just kind of bite size of what this movie offers. Megan, what are your thoughts on that opening scene? Like, how does that affect you as you think about the movie, but just kind of as like a scene in and of itself?
Well, it's masterful world creation. Like instantly, you are instantly dropped into this world. And I love how you take away instantly, like you were saying, the greed and the bottom line focus, but also the willingness to please. So in all of the pitches, it's like, oh, you mean it's like this? Yeah, it's like this. Yeah, absolutely. It's like that. It's like, yes, it's like
With a
you
heart.
had to do it, but with this, with a heart, you know, yeah, with an edge, with a hot, pretty girl. Like it, and it's so ridiculous because they seem to get like more and more extreme. But when I watched that scene, after that movie, I went back and watched 2 of Altman films. I watched The Long Goodbye, which I still have 30 minutes left of, to be honest, and California Split. And both of those have intro shots that are not as choreographed or as beautiful, but the California Split, especially that shot, is a gambling shot. And you follow these 2 guys through their this time gambling on the floor. And it is overlapping dialogue to the extreme. It's so crowded and it works, but it's also really intense because there's so much noise happening. And he really wants to place you like in that gambling floor and what that feels like. And I feel like this is almost 20 years later that he's released this film. And to me, it's a more refined version of that. He has a lot of overlapping dialogue, but there's not, you don't have to work to figure out who to listen to. And I think he does that a lot in this film, especially again in the poolside or the restaurant shots where he's overlapping like Burt Reynolds dialogue, and it's amazing because you feel like you're just moving through these spaces. And I think he does it better in The Player than he does in his earlier films, and so it's really fun to kind of compare them. I read that he mapped that out to an extreme with like models standing in, and he repaved the surface of the lot so that it would be easy for people to walk on. And they filmed it in 10 takes, which is absolutely incredible. That's like theater level stuff. That's just, to me, that's a master. And I think thinking about where Altman was in his career, this is kind of a resurgence for him. And I think also someone who had a lot of issues with Hollywood and not making films maybe that he wanted to or that were as well received throughout the period of time before this. And so it is kind of a little bit of a screw you, I think, too, in a great way.
And I think the Megan, just to kind of, I guess the conversations and the fact that everyone's so subservient to each other, like, first of all, that makes it much more like it kind of establishes the tone for the movie at the beginning. Like, you know
Yeah.
that it's like a satirical thing because there's no way that all these people are actually so wishy-washy and spineless, like, right? So
Yeah.
so that kind of sets that tone, but it also like sets up the dynamic of the plot in a way because, like, you know, now you do like maybe understand why he wouldn't tell someone, like, you don't want to show any weakness or show um any divergence from like what's seen as the exact path you should take if you're in these positions. So it's like it's a good way to both make fun of Hollywood but also like set up it like it
Mhm.
like, you know, Tim Robbins, he just ends up being like he's very isolated, you know, in this place that is so focused on social interactions. And so like that dynamic is set up from like that first scene where it's clear that every social interaction is just like so fabricated.
Yeah, and you get that as the movie almost immediately progresses, where you get the two people who are walking by who are talking about financial issues that hit Columbia and hit Paramount and are probably going to hit the studio, and that you just overhear as they're passing by that Griffin's job, Tim Robbins' character, his job is on the line right now. You start to get the introduction to the Larry Levy character, who is this up and coming producer who's going to directly compete with Tim Robbins. But then when they go to lunch, you get this immediate, and I think one of the things that this as the movie evolves, you almost immediately get kind of the pace that people move through this world. Tim Robbins doesn't really move as though his job is on the line and he's about to potentially lose, this really nice
Mm.
job that he's got and this great access. He moves with kind of this like slowness and this, extreme confidence that when I was rewatching it, I was thinking a lot about how 1992 is not really that long ago. Like within history, 1992 at this, like the time frame between now and 1992, from 1992 was 1959, and like, so you think about how Hollywood evolved from the late 50s to the late 90s and how it's evolved today and where we are culturally. There's been so much of kind of a fissure between Hollywood and the rest of America. But as you watch this movie, you almost get the sense that like this is the period in time when that sort of heartland versus the coastal elites was really beginning
Mm.
from a cultural standpoint. And I was thinking a lot about how like there's financial issues within Hollywood at that point. Well, there's financial issues today. And there's a moment in the early part of the movie where he's hearing a proposal for The Graduate Part 2. And The Graduate Part 2 is going to star all the, same characters from The Graduate, but Anne Bancroft has had a stroke and we've got to double check. Does she have a stroke? Is that okay? Is that going to be funny that she had a stroke? What's going to happen here? And you see the smile kind of come across Griffin's face as he's thinking about it. And to me, that is so symbolic of where Hollywood would eventually go over the next 33 years, which is just doubling down on IP. Like we had great
Mm.
ideas that came out. Why don't we just throw that down their throats again? They'll eat it up. They love The Graduate is a huge movie. They're going to watch it again. But to your point, RJ, about relationships, you see it when they're at lunch, when Angelica Houston and John Cusack are walking by their table. They've just finished a meeting with Larry Levy, and they just can't wait to get out of Griffin's face and get out of this conversation with him. But he's got to do the thing where he, shows face, has a really nice, small talk conversation with them, and then just, gets them on his radar that, hey, if you need to work with someone, I'm the guy that you work with. And that sort of, back and forth relationship building is so big throughout this movie, especially as, you know, um, conflicts emerge between his character and his current significant other, as well as these writers who are sending him anonymous death threats at this point in time.
Well, I love that idea of isolation and the relationships and the conflict being between those two because the film is so crowded. It is full of people all the time. There's rarely scenes with like just one or two people in them. And when they are, they're very different from the rest of the film. And I think that is such a central conflict of this film is that he has this huge thing going on inside of him that he can't tell anybody about, but you kind of get the idea that he wouldn't anyway. Like he seems so everything's so held in, but he's consistently performing in all of these arenas. And I think the crowding of the frame is something that Altman does in a lot of his movies. He packs the film with a ton of people, and in this film, so cool because he got all those people to work, for free. They donated all of their salaries to, a fund that helped people like a retirement home for Hollywood actors when they and Hollywood workers. But it's just interesting that I think he really kind of illustrates that conflict by putting so many people into the film, and I think it's an interesting thing that not a lot of filmmakers do in that way. It's like using a plot point, visually in a way that's really unique.
And I don't think this film works if you don't get those actors. Like you need to feel
Yeah.
you mentioned, like the Jeremy Piven moment. There's like 3 Jeremy Piven scenes where he doesn't really do anything, but it's almost this like from 20 years later, it's this call out to, oh, he was on Entourage and he was a Hollywood mogul at that, in that show. And that was, a show that at its best commented on Hollywood in the early
Mhm.
2000s.
Yeah.
So you get that, from him, and you just get that like little hint there. But Whoopi Goldberg being the detective in Pasadena, Lyle Lovett being the silent detective in Pasadena as well. The fact that the film is so packed with, oh my god, that guy too, gives you a sense that you are within Hollywood as it's making a movie about itself. Um, your comment, Meg, about like the feeling of it in these scenes where it's just one-on-one versus these scenes where there's a lot of ensemble. I'm curious, what character did you guys find yourself relating to or connecting with throughout the movie? Meg, how about you?
I didn't really connect to anyone in this film. I
Really?
was Yeah, I feel like I was really watching the plot and more interested in the plot and the craft of the film. I think
Mm.
that the characters, the person I usually would have related to would probably be his love interest. And I just kind of felt like that, to me, that storyline is confusing because it's just the character of the writer that he kills being with that artist, first of all, did not believe that. Like, that did not make any sense at all. And then she doesn't seem to be at all, like, worried that he was murdered. She's just kind of like, "Okay, like, he was just murdered," and, like,
She's just an artist kind of living in a house that's filled with her art, and she's I'm gonna do an attempt at her last name here. Tell me if
I
you
was
can help me
actually
with
wondering,
this.
I'm like, if anybody can read this, like, is she Icelandic or
Icelandic.
Icelandic? Yeah, but I just think that it just and then she starts this, love affair with this person who clearly was involved with her boyfriend's murder, but it's just kind of okay with her. Um, I did appreciate her just, falling into the moment and going with it, but I felt like I had a deep distrust of Griffin. Obviously, you're supposed to. I will also say the names in this film are amazing. So, like, hats off to the writer of this novel because Griffin Mill is so perfect. But yeah, I never really connected with anyone and was like rooting for them, especially. I was kind of rooting for Griffin for a while, and then at the end, it just seemed he seemed pretty heartless.
Very, very heartless. RJ, did you find yourself connecting with anyone, or was there anyone that you particularly enjoyed watching throughout?
Well, I think the brief appearance of the Law and Order guy, I don't know I can't remember what's his name.
Is that Fred Ward or
No, the writer, the guy who gets killed in Pasadena.
Oh, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio?
Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
yes,
yeah.
yes.
He looks
I
so
think
different than.
he does. Yeah, I think anyone who's ever made anything, created anything, can kind of identify with that, like whether it's podcasts or any other creative thing. It's like being like, come on, you like this is good, and why doesn't anyone like take the time to understand that it's good? That's like
I don't need
basically
your
Totally.
every
apology. I
person.
just need the opportunity. That's all I
Yeah,
need from you is
exactly.
the opportunity.
And like anyone who's ever created anything probably has felt that, So I think that, but I agree. I thought it's interesting because that review that you sent from Letterboxd earlier, I guess that was the main crux of that, was that that relationship was not believable, right? Or that was part of her, which I also I agree, but I think it was like, I don't know. I never thought that any of this was supposed to be believable.
Well, that
Right.
brings up a really interesting point because I feel like, and this is something I struggle with from time to time with movies, and sometimes I think it's just you as a person, the proverbial you, and sometimes it's the movie, and that fine line is like the really interesting aspect of talking about books and movies in this sort of way, because sometimes things just don't fully connect with viewers or with readers. Sometimes they do, and sometimes if it doesn't connect with you, it's kind of on you. It's that weird gray
Hmm.
line. And I think what you're saying here was how I felt about this. Like by about 4 minutes into the opening scene, I was like, oh, I'm just supposed to laugh a bunch throughout this movie.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just
Yeah, yeah.
relaxed and let the story take me. And I feel like any sort of seriousness that you're supposed to take, the murder, and then the fact that Griffin ends up with, and I'm going to try this here.
Do
So
it.
anyone from Iceland, I'm sorry, like don't come at me with this. June Gudmundsdottir, I think that's about
Wow,
as
I'm
close as I can get
impressed.
to it. Like her not seeing Griffin outside of her house, creepily talking to her and falling in love with her, and then going and murdering her boyfriend, and then her just kind of being like, I actually feel a connection to you because there's something about you I have to be near and I have to be close to. And then just kind of going down that rabbit hole with Griffin and that world that he creates. You kind of have to either be up for the ride or not. And if you're not, I don't think you're going to really enjoy this. If you are, there's a ton of just like Easter eggs throughout. I found myself when I was watching this and when I rewatched this, finding the character of Bonnie Chereau most compelling because she's in this really interesting position. You talked about it, RJ, in terms of like the creative experience. She's on kind of the other side where it's clear that she cares about the art. And it's clear
Mhm.
that she wants to have her name stamped on something that's meaningful from a production standpoint, but she hasn't fully accepted the reality of the industry, and that if you're going to be with a guy like Griffin, like it's not going to end well, and her feelings get really hurt throughout this, um so much so that, major spoiler here, and we'll get into this as we move along, but there's a movie within the movie that's being made, and she kind of gets shoehorned into being a part of this movie, and she has all of these notes for why the movie is going to fail by the end of it, but the entire studio turns in favor of the film, and the entire studio backs this push that they're about to make for habeas corpus, um, which has gone from a film that has no stars and no compromises because everything right now has compromises and we need to give you something raw and truly meaningful into something that's basically just like Oscar bait. And she
Shout out
does
to that
not
pitch
want
scene. That pitch scene is fucking awesome. It's
that
so
was going to be
great.
my other scene I wanted to highlight because that you're absolutely right. That scene where they pitch and the actor I'm blanking on
Oh god,
who
they commit so hard. They commit so hard, those actors. It's beautiful.
I think it's let me see if this is yeah, it's Richard E. Grant, who I last saw in Saltburn and was probably the only part of Saltburn that I
Oh
enjoyed.
yeah, except the
Um,
final dance. Come on.
except the final dance, thank you.
Come on.
But like his body is so committed to it. Like he gives you like the tracking shots of what to expect. He like draws you in immediately about what this movie is. And by the end of his pitch, convinces you that we don't need any stars and we need a multi-million dollar production cost behind this. And she's on board with that. That is what she is trying to push. She wants the art to be represented here, and the studio's like, that's never going to sell. We need an Oscar to be able to save our studio. So she gets fired at the end, and I think like her storyline kind of it does a really good job of giving you a sense of like everybody comes to Hollywood with a dream, but 9 times out of 10 you're going to leave Hollywood and go back to whatever town you came from because you can't actually handle the cruelty, the kind of sarcasm of these people. You can't really handle this experience unless you're willing to fully commit to the money is going to drive the art.
Yeah, and I think that her acting is really great. I think when you have a film that's really satirical, you need an actor who's committing 100% to being fairly genuine in their acting. And she does that. She delivers really genuine acting that's really in the moment and really emotional. And I think without that, these films can feel really, really shallow.
Yeah, if you don't have her like actually feeling pain, I don't think that like that contrast between the tone of the movie and her very sincere
Mhm.
desire to make something meaningful while also falling in love, with someone who's incredibly powerful and can get her access within Hollywood. Without that, I don't think that you really have a movie.
Agreed.
Let's talk about kind of the direction of this movie and what Altman did from a cinematography standpoint, a music standpoint. Were there any moments that really stuck out to you guys in terms of how he used the camera, how he used music to really draw you into the larger story and add elements that were not necessarily there from a dialogue standpoint? Meg, I'll start with you.
The score is incredible for this film. It's really dreamy, it's really surreal. It adds that film noir aspect that you really need to give the setting the richness that it needs, especially because it is so, I don't know if this is the right term, but it's sort of technicolor. It's very 90s. It's very angular clothes, bright clothes. Everything's very primary color, And I think that stuff can come off really tinny if it doesn't have a depth underneath it. And I think that the score really does that beautifully. I also think that when I know this is done because of a limitation, but I do want to say that the sex scene in this movie is awesome. And the way that it's done is apparently the actress playing the Icelandic girlfriend didn't want to do a nude scene, and Altman wanted to do a nude scene. And so he had to film it from the neck up. And that limitation is truly beautiful. And it makes a scene that is in such stark contrast to the rest of the film, that is so loud and busy and filled with people and conversations and so much swirling around it, to just circling in or kind of zoning in on two people breathing, basically. And I think it works really, really well. And I think that that limitation forced him to do something really beautiful. And it reminded me of another incredible sex scene in an awesome movie. If you've never seen it, the scene in the film is completely gratuitous. Like, you don't really need it, but like, it's awesome that it's there. The film is Don't Look Now. Have either of you ever seen that?
No.
Okay, put it on your list. It's a Donald Sutherland film. It's from '73. It's a horror mystery, and it's a totally different tone. It's about like the psychology of grief, and it takes place in Venice. It's like all shadows, and it's beautiful and haunting. But there's this sex scene between Donald Sutherland and his wife that is, it is definitely not just from the neck up. It is super everything. It's awesome, but it is so much about breathing. Like, there's almost no music, and it's so filled with breath, and it's really hot. And that kind of reminded me of this. And I thought that that was a nice moment. I love that whole part when they're in the hot springs. There's something so impressive about the way he's able to shift tone. Like, you have them in this really amazing sex scene, and then you have them dancing at night and her in that like killer white outfit that I would totally wear. And then you have them in the mud baths with their like cucumber eyes on and like the masks over their face, which is so cartoonish almost. I just think that he is able to shift between tones in a way that I think is really hard to do.
I would agree with that. And I think he also, like, the way his camera moves, it's like its own character. And he does this in a lot of his films from the 70s as well. You get almost immediately from the start of that tracking shot at the beginning, you get moments where like the camera will zoom in on something that for a few seconds feels innocuous, and then it's an additional plot point. And sometimes it's a movie poster that's in the office. Sometimes it's a postcard. Sometimes, it's like I think that at one point there's like a bottle of water. Like he offers you these opportunities where like the camera kind of works as, I'm not going to tell you what's happening. I'm just going to let the camera show you and hover, and then I'll come back to the scene, and now you know a little bit more about where this story is going to go. And I think that that's done then really well in the scene between Stotzi and Robbins, where they're falling for each other. They make love for the first time, and you're seeing this in a way that you as the viewer want to like experience all of this, through the camera, but he's only giving you a short little, a hint of it, which then adds to kind of the mystery of the overall movie. RJ, anything stick out to you from a direction, from a audio standpoint?
RJ,
I
can I
think
interrupt you really quickly?
yeah,
Before you
please.
share, can I just say that like the fact that he ruins that sex scene, the character, by confessing to murder is very annoying to me. I was like, why are you ruining this? Like, that's so annoying. Anyway,
I
just
love
go.
that.
Well, it's the only truthful thing he does in the entire movie, I think.
Yes,
It is.
maybe that's it,
Yeah.
right? That's his
So it's
vulnerable moment.
probably,
Mhm.
but I agree. Yeah, I mean, the music is good, but it like reinforces maybe it's just the timing of it, and like that it was such a moment in time, but it to me made it even more kitschy because it was so
Yeah.
in the early 90s, but I guess that was the point. um yeah, the driving scenes were really good. There's a lot of good driving cinematography, which I think is like a mix of like the close-ups and then the wide range shots and then the canyon and the winding roads of very like capturing. I don't know, every movie about LA has to have like a lot of driving, and
Right.
but it's like it's not like, oh, now they're driving again. It's like when it happens, it's in like important points in the movie. So I thought that was good. A lot of, I mean, yeah, the camera being its own thing is kind of it's interesting. I think like for some reason I don't really like Tim Robbins. I'm not sure why. I read that Chevy Chase was interested in it, but they didn't want Chevy Chase to play it and it probably would have been too comedic. So I think
Yeah.
like the
Yeah, I
choice
think that was
makes
the right
sense,
call. Mhm.
but I don't really like Tim Robbins. No,
He's
like I
kind of
love
he's kind of
Shawshank.
squirmy. He's kinda like, I don't know, you don't trust him.
Yeah, there's something about him that I just don't. I've never really liked him.
He's a
Isn't
bit
that
too
weird?
tall. No, he's because I'm on the same
RJ takes
page and
offense.
like too many arms
Let me just
there.
see.
Long of
How
arms, that's why you don't
tall
like
is
him.
Tim Robbins? All right, he's 6'5". He's 3 inches
He's
taller than
taller
me.
than you. Okay,
Great.
good.
He no, I kind of know what you mean because like I think the most recent thing I saw him in was honestly The War of the Worlds, which came out 20 years ago, but he already has gray hair and he kind of is playing this he's playing a guy who's already gone like full prepper mode when the Martians show up, and he like plays a pretty pivotal character in that movie in terms of like the threat that the humans are gonna be towards our heroes, and that like it's not just about the aliens invading, it's about how humans react as well. And he kind of plays it in this way that's like overacting that I don't really enjoy. I think the only slight pushback I would have is I think he is, because of what I don't necessarily like about him and kind of the smarminess of him and like that like very swanky California, like I'm better than you because I get to go and take a mud bath with cucumbers on my eyes, and like I know like 45 different brands of bottled water. Like
Yeah, he's so shitty
that
that everybody, like, waits on him. He's like, "I
he's
need
so
this
shitty to
water."
everyone, and like
Yeah.
he he acts like he is the perfect actor for this role in a
Nails
way
it.
that like yeah, Chevy Chase would have been far too lean into the comedy and kind of the slapstick nature of it. Tim Robbins is kind of playing it straight in a way that I think really drives the film forward because it makes him feel like everyone's stereotypical image of a Hollywood exec who you're rooting against, but
Yeah.
you're also kind of rooting for because we love the products that they make ultimately. Um, so one thing I want to talk about here, Meg, you mentioned this at the top that like there's a very meta quality to this. And this is not an original idea in Hollywood to make movies about itself. So I'm curious for you guys, are there any movies that this reminded you of, either the meta Hollywood story or just kind of in general the way that it flowed, that anything that that reminded you of it?
I mean, what I mentioned earlier, 8.5, the Fellini film, is the biggest comp for me, for sure. I think that anytime, a filmmaker chooses to make a film that's not that allows you to that it comments on itself, is I think that's really hard to do, and I was trying to think of other movies that are like that, and it's rare that they're successful, I think, and
Mm,
this one to me is really successful, and so is 8.5. You may have different ideas, Brian, but I think that this movie is really definitive in a way that there's not a lot of movies like this that I can think of. What did you guys think?
I mean, for me, my biggest comp to this movie is kind of on the sincere side, but is also a movie that I think does a great job in its era of commenting on the absurdity of Hollywood, and that's Singing in the Rain, which is
Mm,
much more musically driven than this. But it definitely leans into the large scale production and the kind of insular nature of Hollywood, that like Hollywood's entire reason for existence is to tell the story of the world that we live in, as well as the fantasy worlds that we all imagine. And because of the amount of work and the amount of money that is required to go into that, Hollywood kind of has to exist as its own nation in and of itself. And you
mm,
get these kind of like dual extremes within this and Singing in the Rain, where Singing in the Rain is so much about like, how do I make it? La La Land is similar in this sort of sense. Like,
mm.
how do I make it in this industry that like I want to be a part of, but
I
like
like that comp.
right? But
Yeah,
like doesn't want me, and so
yeah.
I have to prove myself to you. And you get in both of those movies this like really sincere drive towards making something lasting, making something meaningful. Whereas in The Player, it's almost the sense of, and you get this from Griffin, like, I don't necessarily need this, even though I do, but I
Mhm.
don't necessarily need all the like, he's annoyed with everyone that he interacts with, when in reality, like, the position he's gotten to is a dream job for any person who's interested in film. You're the one who's green lighting movies that are going to go and, you know, have a great impact on all these people. But there's this really cynical approach here, whereas Singing in the Rain and La La Land toe the line a little bit more towards the sincerity.
Yeah, what about Babylon?
Yeah, that's another one, because
I
that
just
that kind
thought
of,
about that.
yeah, because that kind of, that does a great job of combining both elements, where there's the
Yeah,
true
it's sincere.
sincerity of, like, Margot Robbie really wants to make it in this world, but also, like, Margot Robbie's character is not in any way adapt to make it beyond silent films, because her voice is so egregious throughout the movie. And so you get this character who's like slowly and then quickly loses her mind because Hollywood accepted her and then rejected her. Yeah, it's a really interesting
Well,
comp.
then also at the end too, how there's like this the end of that movie has that huge kind of like ending that's all about like film and the importance of film and the meaning of film and wanting to
Yeah.
make meaningful films. And which that movie I have a lot of issues with, but I do think that's interesting and it becomes sort of meta at the end in a different way. And I think speaks about kind of like the power and the hope of cinema, but also the flaws of it.
I am 1,000% here for any Damien Chazelle praise. That is, if not my favorite current director, he's in my top 2 or 3. I just love everything he does from a movie standpoint. We will be talking about another one of his movies in a future episode, because it falls in line with RJ's no fat, all meat on the bone. We don't need any extra shit in movies. We literally just need the movie to tell you the story and deliver the story. He does that
He's
perfectly in one of
ambitious.
his
He's
movies,
ambitious too.
but he's also very ambitious. Yeah. RJ, anything come to mind for you?
Well, I just wanted well two things that aren't movies. I think like in terms of the kind of greed and rapaciousness of the 80s, like reminds me of Bonfire of the Vanities, the book. Not I think the
Good
movie
call.
is
Yeah,
bad.
it is
I haven't
bad.
seen the movie, but I've heard that's bad. But the book is great, and I think it kind of taps into this similar. This is like this is seems to be a little bit of a leftover thing from that era, right?
Totally.
So
Totally.
like that reminded me of it. I know you guys don't watch TV shows because it's just so beneath you, but um, the the studio is with Seth Rogen. It's currently on Apple, I think. It's basically
Yeah.
like it's a much more comedic version of this movie. It's ridiculous and hilarious, and it's almost. I mean, I'm sure that this movie inspired Seth Rogen because it's from the like insider talk to the cameos to like the absurd situations that they get themselves in because of all the same motivation to succeed and fear of pissing anyone off, and fear. Seth Rogen as the protagonist is like the perfect person to play this role of like, he basically keeps making horrible decisions because he can't make anyone mad. And
That's awesome.
I mean, and there's a lot of great driving scenes and great cars, and it's a really, really funny show. It's one of the only TV shows I've seen recently where I'm like laughing the entire time. So
Well, I didn't realize this because I think the studio is a great comp. I have not yet watched it, but as I was doing research for this episode, apparently Bryan Cranston plays a character named Griffin Mill in
yeah,
the
he
Yeah,
does. Oh,
studio.
I didn't
yeah.
even put that
Based
together
off of
until just
Inspired
now.
by that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there was
So
a
funny.
pilot for The Player, actually, that was filmed in like
Yep.
95, and then it wasn't greenlit, right?
I didn't
Yeah,
realize that
Patrick
was his
Yeah.
name.
Dempsey.
They only call
Yeah.
him Mr. Mill in
Dempsey.
the show, but that's awesome.
Oh, it's so funny.
That's so
Uh,
awesome. So it's a clear callback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
clear
Wow.
callback. Yeah, Patrick Dempsey, Jennifer Grey, Shelley
God.
Duvall, Natasha Gregson Wagner, a number of other actors were in a pilot for The Player, because I think this is one of those movies that, and you get this every so often. You watch a movie where you're like, cool, that was a perfect 2 hours, I'm done. And then you get a movie like this where you're like, wait, there's probably like 4 10-episode seasons that we could get out of this. And I think that what we, and this is where a lot of media has gone today, but like, how do we get as much out of these characters that we have so we don't have to write brand new characters? That's where you
Yeah.
get television. And so like The Player is like a perfect setup for that. In
Oh my God.
1992, TV was not being received or given to us the way that it is
No.
today.
Yeah.
And so something like that could not have happened, and you had to get something like this into a film. But nowadays, yeah, you can absolutely pump out, 40 episodes about something like this. There's just so many different kind of avenues that you'd want to go down.
I
I was
can't believe
obsessed
that I
with Patrick
can't
Dempsey.
I can't believe that I
Obsessed.
mentioned the studio without specifically knowing that Bryan Cranston's character's name was Griffin.
But you said
'Cause
it's
they-
just Mr. Mill, right?
Yeah, but I'm sure at some point they say it, and I just didn't put it together. And now I retract everything I said because it's just
Okay,
not fair.
that's the beauty of TV. You just kind of hang out for the vibes. You don't actually need to like be like, I know that character versus that character. It's just
Yeah, it's
there's always going to
mindless.
be some new character that's
I know.
brought into it.
It's very mindless. The whole
I'm gonna
TV
watch
thing
that
is
this summer, though. I'm gonna watch
the whole
that this
TV
summer.
thing is very fleeting. I think it'll be gone soon. Good stuff.
So last thing before we give our final word here. So this movie came out in 1992. We talked a bit about the fashion. The double-breasted suits are very prominent. I feel it's really interesting to watch this, and I still feel like the 1990s just happened. I don't know if that's because I was a child in the 1990s. You guys were more children of the 80s. I don't know if you guys feel as though
kid too. Brian, don't
were
age
you
me.
still? Oh,
Kid. I was underage in the 90s.
okay, this is not ageism. I'm just saying I was born in the mid 80s. My entire childhood was in the 1990s, and I look back on that period as kind of just like, well, that was just yesterday. But like it was 33 years ago that this movie came out. Movies were approached much differently than they are today. When you think of this era of movies versus where we are today, what do you kind of like, what are your big takeaways about how this film was approached in a way that is different from what we would see today?
Well, I was thinking about this and I was looking at what movies came out in 1992. It's pretty wild. We're talking about The Last of the Mohicans, The Bodyguard, Single White Female, Far and Away, River Runs Through It, Basic Instinct. These are huge movies with huge movie stars. This is like Julia Roberts, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Richard Gere, Kevin Costner. It was the age of the gorgeous movie star that was also a grown-up. I think now it's so different. Now there's so many movie stars that are really young. And I think this is a time when, even though Julia Roberts was young, the time there was just a sophistication to her that I think played very adult. And maybe that's because of how young I was looking up to them. But to me, those are real kind of adult movie stars. And the movies were all about like romance and anxiety or greed or stressful interpersonal situations, and thinking about what's happening in the movies in the 90s, that's really when so much changes because CGI and technology advances become massive in this era. So this decade is when movies like completely change. And I think, like you were saying earlier, Brian, is a lot to do why the IP stuff happened, because they realized we can make a lot of this stuff that are technology based and we can make a lot of them. So to me, this is almost like the end of an era. Like even looking at like 91, it was like Cape Fear and JFK and Prince of Tides. And there's just a lot of these big, huge movies that none of them have CGI in them. You know, they're all mostly about interpersonal relationships. And I think it's a really big change to today.
It's a really good point. Chris Ryan over at the Big Picture podcast always laments that this was an era where you could make a movie for 30 million bucks and it would make 60 million bucks and everyone would go home happy.
And that
And
was
you didn't have to
fine.
put
Yeah.
you didn't have to put years and years of effort into it. Film shoots could be like 20, 30 days. The editing process was much less because you didn't have as much CGI at that point in time. You didn't have to, beat people over the head with fan fiction and with IP and all that sort of stuff. And you could essentially give someone just a story in the same sort of way that we get with novels. You get a ton of novels that are released
Yes.
throughout the year. You never read all of them. RJ might, but you get all these kind of celebrity book club recommendations and New York Times book club recommendations, and however many filter through to you, and essentially they're just stories and they're just people. And if you want to read that kind of like fantasy IP sort of stuff, it's over there as well. Now with movies, because of production costs and the fact that we can never have a movie that just makes $70 million and hits with an adult audience, everything has to be this gigantic hit. And so there isn't as much experimentation, as much kind of genre filmmaking where you could just say, "Hey, this is a comedy, this is a mystery, this is a courtroom drama," and that's all it is. It now has to have this kind of like gigantic feeling to it, gigantic symbolism that all wraps around to make you feel as though you just watched something truly meaningful. This movie doesn't have a ton of meaning, but has a ton that you can sink your teeth into. RJ, what are your thoughts?
I guess my thought is like sort of on the other side of that, which is that to be like a thoughtful movie now, it seems it has to be like thematically driven as opposed to plot driven. Like plot driven movies
Mm.
it's like, I'm probably wrong, but like plot, it seems to me that plot driven movies are big productions, right? Like the ones you're describing, and that's where like I mean, and the plots are all the same, but like you get like I just watched A Real Pain recently, and I loved it. It's great, but like it wasn't really about. There was a theme, It was about the themes
Totally.
that they were trying to, and it's like that onion thing that I sent to you guys the other day. It was like you can't even watch a movie these days without them trying to give you a theme or symbolism or whatever. But it's kind of true.
I
Like
love
it's
that.
what's great about this movie is like it's super tight plot as we've discussed, but it's also like there is more to it to sink your teeth into. And I feel like now we have to like either watch a like big plot driven movie that's like a huge blockbuster, or watch like an indie film that's about, you know, themes that I don't understand the first time, or like there's no middle ground. So like making good movies that are also really well driven in terms of plot seem to have like gone away.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, we will, as this show evolves, we will force you to watch great movies from the 2020s and the 2010s. I promise that they're there, but
Oh yeah.
I do agree with your larger point here. The fact that I've been watching the Mission Impossible series just because I kind of needed like big fun action movies about spies in gorgeous European cities around the world and people in really great outfits. And the one thing that like I just don't understand about these movies is that before anything happens in any scene, like 6 characters have to tell you what's happened and what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And then they have to tell you how meaningful what's about to happen is about to happen. And it's like literally 4.5 minutes of dialogue that's basically like, so we're gonna do this, and then this is gonna happen, and then that's gonna happen, and then this is gonna happen, and this is why this has happened, because we talked about this 20 minutes ago, and this is the most meaningful thing that anyone's ever done. And you're like sitting there as a viewer, just like, can you just fucking do it? Like, just do the thing. Just do the thing and give me the opportunity to understand it myself. And I think that, to your point, RJ, themes come out of plot. And I think that what we've been talking about here is like, there are a lot of themes to bite off of in this movie and really consider and think about in terms of where this movie emerged culturally and what it was saying about Hollywood and what it was saying about media at the time. But it also, like, you could just throw this movie on a Saturday night and just watch it because
Still
you have nothing else to
entertaining.
do and just be totally entertained by that.
Yeah, and that's hard to do, I think, and a little bit of what you're saying about the Mission Impossible movies, which I do love before I send this hate out, but I love those movies. I love spy movies, but it's like they're not you don't get smarter after you watch a Mission Impossible movie because it's a movie for dummies. Like they're like telegraphing everything, and this is a movie that you're going to get a little smarter even though it's fun and entertaining. Which is cool.
That's the larger goal here before we lose the Mission Impossible crowd. Promise we'll probably do one of them at some point in this, because
I
I
love spy
actually,
movies. Huge fan.
well, and I watched what was it, Ghost Protocol from 2011, and I was like, this is like
That one
everything
rules.
I want from an action movie. All right, before we go here, I have to get your guys' ratings over this movie, and we're going to compare
Oh.
our ratings to the Letterboxd average. What do you guys want first? Do you want to pick your ratings, or you want me to give you the average? Where should we go here?
I mean, I'll tell you what my rating is.
Give us your rating.
This is a 5-star movie.
That's how I
It's a
felt.
5-star movie. It's a
This is a
5-star movie.
masterpiece.
It is. I think we talked a little bit about the ending, but the circularity of the plot, and we've talked about how tight the plot is, and the fact that and we've been talking about this a lot in our text chain and also on HF Pod, but the ending, it just lands with such a punch, and the way that you don't realize that the whole movie is about the pitch he's getting at the end when he realizes he's being blackmailed, and he's like, what would we call this movie? And he's like, we'd call it The Player. And it's like, that is like, it's such a perfect button ending. And then he comes in and she says, where have you been? He's like, traffic was awful or whatever, which is the exact end of the line in Habeas Corpus. It's so perfect. And he like pulls her in for the movie star kiss, and he puts his hand on her pregnant stomach, and it's just, and then it kind of like zooms in on
You get
them.
the end, like,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
like
just
a really
the
like
end. Yeah, and
50s, just like, oh, it's great.
it's so good. And to me, it's just one of those films that they knew what they were doing the whole way through, and you should have expected that, but you don't. And it's so great. So I think that this is a perfect film for all the reasons we've discussed, and because it's still fun.
RJ, what do you got? Are you gonna disappoint us with a 3.5? What do you got?
I changed it today from 4 to 4.5 after thinking more about it.
We get a half star more. I like it.
It's
Tell
great.
me what keeps this from a 5-star movie for you. I think that's interesting.
Wow. Well, I guess only time will tell. I mean, I just started like rating movies that I've seen, so I'm a little late to this game. The only 5-star movies that I have are movies that I still think about. So I guess the question is going to be: is this like
like that.
is this a lasting one or not? You know, and I don't know if it will be, but I think for all the reasons that you both pointed out, like I think it's pretty perfect. But to get to like that level of, you know, The Godfather or some of the others that I told you I gave 5 stars to, we'll have to see. We'll have to see.
RJ, the harsh critic over here. I love it. Here we go. Here we go.
Once I started rating movies on Letterboxd, I just started going like they've gotten higher and higher. I don't know why.
It's
Just
pretty addictive.
fun, and it's kind of like, oh, like I did love this movie. Yeah, it's fun.
I have this as a 5-star masterpiece. Part of my reasoning for it, I watch a lot of movies, and as a result, I don't really rewatch a lot of movies unless it's like really intentional, because I'm either rewatching stuff that's up for the Oscars, or I watch Goodfellas on my birthday every year, stuff like that. But I rewatched this a week after I watched it the first time, because I just was like, I got to live in that world again. And that is a pretty rare thing for me at this point. Even if I love a movie, I'm not usually diving back in a month later, let alone a week later. So I just love to live in this world. To your point, Meg, I thought that they knew exactly what they were doing right up until the end. I really wanted just Hollywood to kind of laugh at me and take me along on a ride. And this did it. So the Letterboxd average rating is 4 stars. So RJ right in the middle there. RJ is our balancing act between Letterboxd and the community. Any last words that you guys want to say about The Player at this point?
I just want to say I really enjoyed being able to watch a movie this closely. I watched it again to get ready for this episode, and I think in the past I've always watched film. Been obsessed with movies. I wanted to be an actor for so long, and I've always loved film. But I watch them a lot of the time without thinking a ton, and it's been really fun to start watching movies and thinking really deeply. So thanks for giving me that opportunity. Appreciate it.
I love it. RJ, anything from you?
No, I mean, I think I should watch it again at some point. There's so many things that we didn't get to talk about, like the police station scene. There's so many different parts of
Yes.
this movie that are just kind of amazing, and all these cameos, like the Cher thing, is just like hilarious. It just there's a lot more layers of depth here. So I appreciate being able to talk about it, but I think I need to watch it again.
Well, my last thought is a comment I've been wanting to say for about 5 years now. This is anytime RJ turned down my ideas for a podcast series on Osiris, I just want to say, I'm a writer. What do you do?
Thank you. That's awesome. Wow.
So thank you all for listening to our very first episode of Blockbuster Card, a podcast within a podcast. We'll be back with another episode of Blockbuster Card. I don't know exactly when, but we will be watching the movie After Hours by Martin Scorsese, which has another Griffin in that movie. Maybe we're just going to do a parade of Griffin-related movies going forward here. But After Hours is from 1985. It should be available on streaming. Last I checked, it was on Prime. If not, you can rent it for like $3.99 on Apple TV. Highly recommend it. It's only 90 minutes long, and it is a wild ride. That will be our next episode of Blockbuster Card. The library card, our next library card episode, will be covering Long Island Compromise, which we are all very, very excited to dive into. We are doing that in 2 weeks. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, I think on June 2nd.
June 2nd. And then we're going to have a couple of weeks in the middle of June where RJ is going to be out of commission, and maybe we'll just have to do like 17 Blockbuster Card episodes just to get the feed rolling.
Can they all be movies from the 80s? No, I'm just kidding, but kind of not.
We can do Paris, Texas, but we have to have RJ watch Paris, Texas.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Going to be a lot of fun here. Hopefully not a crazy time commitment for you listeners out there. Check out more movies and less TV shows, because movies are better than TV shows. Can't wait for the next episode here at Blockbuster Card. Meg, RJ, thank you guys so much. Thanks everyone for hanging with us here in the chat. Thank you, Perfect Speller. Kevin Barry, we promise we will get you a list of our Mount Rushmore episodes over on our third podcast here, HF Pod. Thanks everyone for hanging with us. We will see you at the movies next time.
Thanks, everyone.